toileting is a huge thing. I think having a toileting regime in place where you perhaps take the person to the toilet every couple of hours will often work quite well for people, because ideally if the person is not incontinent, it's as well to keep them continent for as long as you possibly can, and a good toileting regime will help in that regard because it puts predictability in. You'll often find that people with dementia will forget they've just been to the toilet and claim that they need to go again, and carers find that very, very frustrating. It has to be borne in mind that they will not deliberately be doing that. They truly will not remember that they've just been, and you trying to convince them that they have just been will actually lead to some rising tension. So if you have the strength, then it's a good idea to take them again.
And also then if you ask them, do you need to go to the toilet? And they'll often say no.
Yes.
When in fact it's probably the wrong question to ask.
It's again getting that, they'll say no because no is safer. Again, we all of us have situations where we might go to the toilet and then we go to bed and then we need the toilet and we get up and we don't think anything of it. So it's not just forgetting. Sometimes people don't completely empty their bladder and they do need to go to the toilet again. The whole thing around taking somebody to the toilet is quite a humiliating experience for both parties, and it's really important to minimise that by making it quite a normal thing to do and keeping calm. It can be fraught, particularly if the person has difficulty sitting on the toilet or finding the toilet, and very often it can take half an hour to do a fairly simple task like getting the trousers down. If the carer can remain calm, the person will be calmer and you're more likely to get that compliance. If all else fails, then there might be a number of times when you go to the toilet, the person changes their mind and you're coming back away again, but be careful that you don't make too much of a deal of that, because otherwise you're going to create what's almost like a phobic reaction to the toilet. The going to the toilet is going to become something that is stress related, and you don't want that to occur. So as far as possible, normalise it. Another thing is that very few people would advertise the fact that they had incontinence, and people with dementia will often deny it. And the carer might be trying to get them to wear a pad and they won't want to wear a pad because they'll associate wearing a pad with being incontinent, and being incontinent with being old and perhaps useless. And they might also fear that that will lead to them being put away if they're incontinent. They might have all sorts of messages in their head as to why. So sometimes people can be very threatened at the idea of putting a pad on, and that can be a tricky thing. And again, it's important not to labour that too much. Try to get perhaps somebody used to a sort of little tenor pad rather than one of the great big scary looking pads that holds sort of several gallons, because sometimes people will accept a pad that is very discreet, but they don't want something that is obvious from the outside of their clothing. So if, as well, what I tend to do, even though I haven't had children, I will talk about, oh yes, your bladder gets a bit dodgy when you've had children. That again is about validating that this is a common condition, not something that you only have because you're old and because you've got dementia and because you are somehow different from me. So I tend to sort of get, particularly with women, in a kind of a conspiratorial sisterly kind of thing. It's us girls sort of message. For home carers, that's something that they can do very well. And in nursing homes, it's useful to have one person that can confide in, that you can have, again, that sisterly thing going on where the person will discreetly go with a certain member of staff. A pad is found from a drawer, not from a big stack of pads, and the whole thing is done as our little secret. And that's where it can be useful to have a home care coming in. There's been many a time when I've gone into somebody's home and the person has accepted me because I'm an outsider, because they don't want to put their spouse to the trouble of caring for them, because they feel that it's shameful and their loved one shouldn't have to do these things for them. They feel a lot of embarrassment and a lot of a sense that they're letting the person down, and sometimes they'll be more comfortable with an outsider doing it, particularly if the outsider does become this person who does these sorts of things, so that the marital relationship can stay a little more intact and a little more equal rather than caregiver, care receiver. So it can be useful sometimes to have help coming in on that task.